everyone, and welcome to today's session of Shergroup on the Sofa. I hope you're all in a good place today. And with me today, I'm joined by Mark Alexander, a property guru and superstar in the property space in the UK and indeed further afield. So hi, Mark, and great to have you here today.
Hi, Claire. Thank you for the invitation. An international call today. You being in Florida and me being in Malta.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That is it. Well, hello to Joseph in Malta, who's part of our community in the credit management space.
I've got a hello to say as well, Claire. I believe that because you're from Norfolk, and actually I came from Norfolk as well, and I know that you've got a big fan who's a nephew of yours called Ross. So big shout out to Ross. Hey mate, come on you Yellows. I believe you're a big Norwich City fan.
Thank you very much for that. His auntie knows nothing about football, so I'm afraid I'm a bit of a desert when it comes to that, but he is their #1 supporter. So yeah, so thank you very much.
Well, I can talk about property. I've seen a few Norwich City games, but property is more my bag as well, Claire.
Okay, well, I'm married to a West Ham supporter, so we better not get into that. Okay, so private landlords, what a hot topic. And I mean, it's a hot topic now. It's been a hot topic over the last decade. Tougher legislation. Come on, you're a pundit. What do you think is going to happen to landlords in the UK, in the next 12 months, next 5 years? How do you see it playing out?
It's a great question, Claire. I think that we're going to see a lot of polarization in the market, because there's lots of things that have happened to landlords. And, I read the news on property118.com and comment a lot in the comments. And landlords seem to think that, the government throws another piece of anti-landlord legislation at them on a weekly basis, as fast as they can think it up. It appears in a new white paper or a discussion. Probably the biggest ones over the last decade have been Section 24, so the restrictions on finance cost relief. So for those who don't know what that means, basically any business in the UK can offset its finance costs against its income, with the exception of private landlords, but only if they own the properties privately. They can still do it if they're a company. So it's a bit of a weird piece of legislation, but it's messed a lot of landlords up that have been in the business for a long time. And then there's been Section 21, and that was basically the ability to recover possession or to serve notice to recover possession of your own property without having to give a reason for it. So whether the tenant was in arrears or a bit antisocial or a bit messy, or you wanted to go back live in the place, it didn't matter what it was, you wanted to sell it, you could just serve this Section 21 notice and go and get to the courts to get possession if necessary, if the tenants didn't leave. And the government is scrapping that as well. So I think that's scaring a lot of landlords. And what I think is happening in the polarization that I talked about is that you've got a group of big landlords who own lots and lots of properties, and they want to continue to run a property business as a business until they die and build a legacy and fund their retirement and leave something to the kids, the grandkids, the great grandkids, and so on. And I think those landlords take the view, well, okay, we're either in a limited company or we switch to one, so with Section 24, but it doesn't bother us. We don't really want to serve notice to people. We're still going to be able to recover possession if we want to sell a property. The mortgage lender's still going to be able to recover possession if they need to. So we're really not that bothered about Section 21 anyway. We don't really serve very many of them, and we'll just serve a different type of notice and get rid of the really bad tenants that way. On the other hand, you've got the smaller operators. So the accidental landlords, and there's many, many more of those, probably 90% of landlords, the smaller operators, accidental landlords, where sort of boy meets girl, and then the girl moves in with the fellow and rents her property out because she wants a bolt hole to go back to if the relationship doesn't work. There's lots of landlords like that. And of course, it terrifies them that if they can't get possession of their property back, then that bolt hole reason for doing this in the first place no longer exists. And I think they're selling up in droves. If they're higher rate taxpayers, they get stung by this Section 24 tax relief as well. So A real polarization is what I see going forwards. I think we'll end up with a chunk of professionalized corporate landlords, and I think the government wants that.
Yeah.
I don't think the government really has thought through the implications of losing all these smaller landlords. You know, I appreciate it's like herding cats, trying to regulate them. You know, somebody's boiler breaks down and they haven't got enough money to pay for it. What do they do? And so on and so forth. So there are pros and cons against these smaller accidental landlords, but I really do feel for them, and we campaign and fight for them all the time, as you know, Claire.
Yes, yes, through Property 118, you do a great service for landlords in information and support and campaigning. I know you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's how you really see the market. And when you talk about corporate landlords, I mean, we obviously we engage with landlords through Shergroup in terms of repossession of property for landlords. That's our kind of first encounter off with a landlord, and then we're developing our portfolio.
Indeed, and we recommend you highly, and so do several of our members, probably.
Yes,
probably why I've been invited to the couch.
Yes, Robert Mellors from Choice Housing. Hello, Robert. You've been a great supporter of ours, and anyone else that supports Shergroup. We appreciate you, and you can come on the couch and talk about your business. I'd love to hear from you, because we like to have people with. I like to interview people that have got experience and some connection to Shergroup and Shergroup's experiences of building our brand. But in terms of, you know, these professionalized landlords, I mean, how many properties with one of these sort of landlords? What's the kind of minimum? 5, 10, 20? What do you mean?
It's interesting because if I was starting again today, and I think most landlords would say this, if we were starting again today, we'd start off by buying our first property in a limited company. Now, whether you've got one property or 100, it's a mindset thing as to where you want to end up as. So I don't think you can say a corporate landlord must have 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 500 or whatever many properties. I think it's about the mindset. And I think, so any landlord that operates as a limited company is in a very different space from a taxation perspective than the private landlord.
Yes. And in Property 118, do you have accountants who are expert at handling landlord finances and the tax position for landlords? Because that's very important. They can catch a cold if they're not properly advised.
Absolutely. We have several hundreds, if not thousands, of accountants that comment on Property 118 and refer business to Property 118. Our business is actually a tax planning consultancy business, so we work alongside accountants.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it is accountants look in the rearview mirror. They report on what's happened in the past in the most compliant and productive, tax efficient way for you to report your finances.
Yeah.
A tax consultant, which is what Property 118 does, and we have a joint venture partnership with Cotswold Barristers. We look more into the future. So we say, this is where you are, where do you want to get to, and what's the best structure to achieve that within? So is it on your own as a sole owner? Is it a partnership? Is it a limited liability partnership, limited company, and many, many other different structures? So we get involved with accountants to deal with the transitional stuff. They deal with things like the tax returns, the VAT returns, the bookkeeping, and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's important because I'm a great Telegraph reader, and the Telegraph are always covering in their property section the plight of landlords and tenants. You know, but they comment on it widely, and what is very clear is that many Brits. And I know your business goes wider than the UK, but that is our homeland. Even though we've broadened our horizons. Yes. Yeah. But many Brits are using property to bulk up their pensions and to give them a lifestyle in retirement, which I fully support.
Absolutely, and we're very close friends, funnily enough, with the Telegraph. One of the Telegraph's lead property reporters actually comes onto Property 118 and posts on Property 118 saying, I'm writing an article. So she's done it recently about there's some changes in the law or proposed changes in the law announced this week, talking about changes in holiday lets. a couple of weeks ago, she did a very big article, or in the Telegraph did a very big article on a landlord in Nottingham called Mick Roberts, who's actually he wants to retire. He wants to sell his properties, but he doesn't want to get his tenants to move out. He doesn't want to sell them with vacant possession. He's developed relationships with some of his tenants over 10, 20 years plus. So he doesn't want to put anybody out on the streets. They can't find anywhere to go. A lot of them are benefits tenants. So they can't find other homes. And the Telegraph wrote a big article about Mick because he was actually saying, you know what, I will give 10% discount to any tenant that wants to buy my property.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was actually a Property 118 main contributor. And so he was offering 10% discount. And at that time, that's when Boris talked about being able to use your housing benefit to be able to get a mortgage. So he was like, come on, Boris, let's see this actually work in practice. I've got 40 houses I want to sell on this basis. I don't think anything happened. He also put it out there that if any other landlords wanted to buy his properties, he'll give them the 10% discount. And guess what? He's still got all 40 properties and he just wants to retire, poor guy. So, yeah, it's really tough.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's a bit like bailiffs. Landlords cop it as the bad guy because they are the Goliath in the relationship of, you know, the tenant is the David and the landlord is the Goliath. But
I think that's the way they see it. But I think a lot of landlords see it the other way around.
I can understand that, and I especially when they've done it to, let's say, give themselves some comfort and some space in retirement and enjoy their retirement, which is what we're all working for, right? We're all working for our retirements, and we should be supporting landlords. I think the government have got it wrong in this area. I really do. We do the repossession, the tough side of the landlord piece, and we see district judges, you know, refusing to transfer up to the High Court based on discretion because they want to give the tenant longer in a property where they're not paying rent and they're not looking after the property.
Absolutely. If you look at it from a social perspective, I feel sorry for the neighbours of tenants because you think about it going forward. If the landlord can't serve a Section 21 notice on them, and these people might be druggies, party animals, really scruffy, playing noise at 4 o'clock, ridiculous music at 4 o'clock in the morning, the landlord won't be able to get rid of them going forwards. So it's the people living near these tenants as well. So it's not just about landlord and tenant, it's about just being respectable. And the government seems to be taking away and giving the tenants so many rights that even if they stop paying their rents and they start trashing the place, turning into party animals and just behave badly, the government almost seems to say, oh, well, that's fine because you're a poor tenant. And, you know, poor landlord's pulling his hair out, so are the neighbours, and nobody could do anything. It's an awful, awful scenario.
Yes. Well, there's a lot to be said for government taking ownership of the housing issue and creating more housing where, you know, people they house the people rather than putting it onto landlords. So it's a very complex situation. I don't think there are any easy answers.
It is, and they're continuing to sell the social housing stock at a discount. I mean,
yes, which is crazy.
Couldn't make it up, could you?
No, I don't agree with that. So you mentioned Section 24 earlier, and the financial ways that
restrictions on finance.
Yeah. So how do you see that? What are your views on that?
So landlords actually have more choices than they might think. So in a perfect world, you'd just be able to sell all your properties to your own company and there wouldn't be any stamp duty, there wouldn't be any tax, and there wouldn't be any refinancing to do. If you're a small landlord with maybe 2 or 3 properties and it's not really, you're not committing a significant amount of time to the business, and you are pretty much stuck in that position. For the ones that are working, maybe working 20 hours a week in their business, then that position is very different. So there are, believe it or not, lots of reliefs that are available to enable landlords to sell their business, their properties to a limited company, and to roll over the capital gains. And if they're a partnership, they don't have to pay the stamp duty. And there are even a few different ways around making that sale occur without having to remortgage the properties. So it can be done, but it's a very, very complex area. And really you need the client who wants to do it. The accountant has got to account for the transition and the way it's going forward. You need the tax planner, you need the barrister, all to get their heads together and put this together. And that's what sort of monetized side of Property 118 does. So a lot of what Property 118 does is not for profit. So the campaigning, the forums, the newsletters, memberships, all that's free. But the monetized side is helping landlords to transition from one ownership structure that may not be appropriate for them anymore for tax or other commercial reasons to another one without sort of having to pay an arm and a leg to do it.
Yeah. So if somebody, I mean, that is so good to know that you're there and that you're able to guide landlords and have the resources through, what you've built with your tax consultancy, I imagine. How do they get in contact with you if they want that particular service? When they, they come onto the Property 118 website, how do they
come onto the Property 118 website? It's actually really hard to miss. Our website designers have done a brilliant job of sort of having the HMRC little tax plan, the light bulb moment, and landlord tax planning consultations book here. Right. If you want to go direct to the relevant pages, it's property118.com/tax.
Oh, well, it can't be any simpler than that. So if anyone, and that includes, I would say, because obviously our segment goes out to lawyers as well. If you find yourself advising a landlord and trying to get that right for a landlord, use Property 118, as a resource. I know that our lawyer Charles Stevens uses you guys as a resource. So don't be shy about that. It's a complex area, changing all the time.
Charles is a very prolific commenter, and we're very grateful for his insights that he shares with the community.
Yes. Funnily enough, I'm sure a lot of lawyers actually have got quite strong views about what they're seeing with government policy in this area. But we have, he joined Shergroup, and I welcome the commentary from him and other practitioners like yourself.
There's another big solicitor in London called Ian Narberth, and he regularly comments as well. Yeah, and it is wonderful to have a mix of not just landlords, property developers and property investors, but also these associated professionals, so mortgage brokers, solicitors, accountants, financial planners, barristers, letting agents, estate agents, sheriffs, of course, all getting involved in these conversations, because I think it gives a bigger picture. So yeah, it works really, really well on that side of things. And
actually, you are the people that are living with the problem, living with the problems and giving the solutions, maybe in a way that government officials, in their government departments are not seeing, and MPs are not seeing, and therefore I always think it's very, very valuable that professionals, particularly lawyers, advising on housing and landlord and tenant property, are pitching in if they feel they can without breaking.
We always joke, Claire, that if there was actually a chancellor, if there was actually a housing minister that they kept long enough to sign up to Property 118 and create his member profile and actually do some commenting, he might actually learn something, and the government might actually solve this housing crisis once and for all.
Yeah, it's a bit of a poison chalice, that one, I imagine, in cabinet, for somebody to take on that. But it has to be solved because people have to be housed, and it shouldn't be down to private landlords to carry that burden. That's a government responsibility. And
I can share a view with you on this as well. You can't regulate. If you over-regulate, then the market contracts. Yeah. Basically, if the government took the brakes off regulation and actually incentivized landlords to develop properties, then what would actually happen? Okay, there'll be lots and lots more properties. And it should be a bit like hotels then. So, you'd have reviews that if there was more properties available than there were tenants looking for them, then nobody would rent the shitty, mouldy, smelly, falling down house with the electrics all over the place or whatever. That would never be a problem. People wouldn't live in sheds if there were enough houses. So if the government simply incentivized the private rented sector to grow,
Yeah.
not necessarily by buying first time buyer houses, but by developing,
Yeah.
then, and I think they're doing it to a very small extent with sort of the permitted development rights. So you can convert shops into blocks of flats, for example, without planning permission, but it's too small. They need to give bigger incentives, and then the housing price crisis will end quite quickly, because, as I say, people won't move into a bad house out of choice. They do it out of finance. And if there are more properties available, the bad ones, the prices, well, all of the prices actually will start dropping, because it'll be supply and demand in the other way. There will be more tenants wanting the properties than there is supply for the landlords. So they'll have to drop the prices and compete and bring their properties up to standard. So that's the way to do it, rather than regulation. So I hope the Housing Minister and the Chancellor, and hopefully Boris even, are actually watching this, because that's for you guys.
Yeah, that's for you guys. And get creative about housing as well. Let's have some creative housing solutions, rather than just first time boxes for buyers.
Absolutely.
Let's reuse some of the wonderful architecture we've got and the wonderful sites. But it's all going to change anyway, because people aren't going back to offices. Where's all that office real estate going to go? Someone's going to, it's ripe for being developed.
Absolutely.
In some shape or form. So, and just sticking with the taxation theme, people who want to continue in the business of providing rental housing, I mean, you mentioned about the polarization, but I mean, what would your advice be, to those folk?
I think it's got to be, you will say this in your industry as well, Claire. If you think professional advice is expensive, try the amateurs.
Yeah, that's very true.
The amateur advice, the self-advised people, the people want to take the shortcuts, always end up paying loads and loads and loads more. Simple example. Let's say that somebody buys a house today to rent out. It's only one. They pay $250,000 for it. Well, in 1971, when my parents bought their first house, they paid £3,000 for it. The same house is still there. It's worth £300,000. So it's gone up 100-fold in value in 50 years.
Yeah.
Now, if you apply that in the future, and just say history often repeats itself, not guaranteed, but a 250,000 house today could be worth 25 million 50 years from now. We may not be around. Kids have got a good chance. Grandkids have got a very good chance. If it has passed 2 generations, they'll pay 40% inheritance tax twice every time that house changes hands. So if somebody's buying for the long term, for their pension and to leave it as a legacy, then they need to think about these things. Now, let's take that £25 million house of the future. That means somebody has got to pay around £10 million worth of inheritance tax before they can actually get their hands on the house, because probate won't be released to them until they've got it. So a lot of people are storing up huge multi-million pound problems for their kids and their grandkids without really thinking about it. And if they do think about it, clearly they would never go down that route. And it's possible to put simple structures in place that effective tax structures aren't just available to Starbucks and Google and the Rothschilds of this world. They were maybe 50, 100 years ago, that was the case. But nowadays, with a bit of foresight and a bit of planning and asking the right questions and just a small investment into a tax consultation, the right people can ask the right questions and put these scenarios to you and ask you what you want to do about them, and they are all solvable.
I mean, you're democratizing the ability for people to own property, through these sort of discussions and through some of the vehicles that you've set up, so that what we might call, working class men and women, middle class men and women who've got the money to invest are able to take advantage of these property
Absolutely.
investments.
But do you know what, Claire? 99% of people who go to an estate agent and buy a house for investment still buy it in their own name, oblivious to the fact that there are all these problems that, there's so many stones under the water and they don't know they exist and they just don't take advice. And I'm just really hoping that anybody that is in that position who's listening to this, please don't buy another property until I don't do tax consultations now, but I have a team of 10 that do, and 4 barristers in the background. It only costs £400 to have a tax consultation with Property 118.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel you've had good value for money, for whatever reason, no quibble, it comes with the money back guarantee. So it's really costing you nothing unless you actually get benefit from it.
I think that's a very wise investment. If you're prepared to invest thousands in a property, why wouldn't you take tax advice at the outset? And again, I think the fact that you're advocating to buy, I know you are, property through a limited company vehicle rather than in their individual names. I mean, who's saying that? That needs to be really broadcast out there. And of course, you're on here today talking about it. But that's a message that we want to get out to all landlord communities and make sure.
Absolutely. Buy it in a limited company, but don't spend £12.99 and do it yourself on the internet. No. Don't get your accountant to set it up for a few £100.
Yeah.
Do it properly. It's like building the foundations of your business.
Yeah, no, that's terrific advice.
You can build your house on sand and you can underpin it later, but it costs a lot more. When it starts falling down, that's when you've got a big problem. And your buy-to-let business is exactly the same. Build the foundations first, not just a normal limited company, but have a smart company structure. And for those who don't know what it is, just Google smart company structure. You'll find it on Property 118. And there's loads of videos that we've done with other people about smart property company structures. I won't go into the technicalities of that, but it's out there if you want to explore it.
Terrific. And you've got all the resources, as you say. Now, I want to change gears with you, as they say in America, on moving away from landlords. I mean, we've both managed to build businesses outside of the UK. Not that we don't love home, I guess. I'm sure you're the same as me, but the world's a shrinking place.
Indeed.
Now you have got a home in Russia, as I understand it. It's very topical at the moment.
Yeah.
And your wife was born in Russia. So how has the conflict affected you and your family?
Good point. Actually, my wife wasn't born in Russia. She was born in the Soviet Union.
Oh, right.
Anybody before 92 was born in the Soviet Union, of course. And my wife's family is actually not unusual. It sounds like, for British people watching it, might sound an unusual situation. But my wife's grandmother had 4 daughters. And 2 of them married Ukrainian army officers and 2 of them married Russian army officers. So her family is now split. So half live in Russia, half live in the Ukraine. So you could imagine when this invasion actually occurred, we all thought it was going to be sort of a saber-rattling military operation. And then they actually crossed the border and it all got really nasty. So having family in both countries has been a real challenge. There's been a lot of challenges associated with the economic sanctions that we perhaps hadn't thought. There was a lot of big press saying, we've won the economic war against Russia when the economic sanctions first went in, because the ruble went from about 100 rubles to the pound to 250 rubles to the pound. Everybody was saying, Russia's going to have to back out. And it was the worst performing currency of the year within a period of 2 or 3 weeks. It's now the best performing currency in the world this year. So it's gone the other way. It's now 60 rubles to the pound. So it's very expensive, even if you can buy something in Russia. But it goes way beyond that. So like a lot of people that have got family in Eastern Europe, the people who are outside of Eastern Europe send money back to the family to help them with their standards of living. There's a lot of people in Eastern Europe that live below the poverty line, and my wife's family are some of those people. So her mum, for example, is reliant on drugs to keep her alive that we pay for. Now, of course, if we can't send her money, it causes a problem. So some little old granny could die as a result of this war without a bullet being fired. And there's going to be lots and lots of that sort of thing happening as well. So that's from a personal side. From a business side, I could talk about that as well, because we're actually developing a supermarket in Russia that's pre-let. It's supposed to be finished in October. It's pre-let to the largest chain, the largest supermarket chain in Russia. So it'll be an investment property for us. But of course, getting materials into Russia has become an absolute nightmare. Inflation over there is skyrocketing. And even if I could do that, I can't transfer the money to get it into Russia anymore.
Yeah.
So the one prayer that's been answered for us in the whole of that is, from my perspective, nobody has died in this yet on either side of my
thank goodness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I do understand a little bit of it, because on my daughter's side, her stepmother's to be, her mother is Ukrainian, and they went over and brought her out. So they got her to the border and then got her out, and she's now in London. So
my wife's got a cousin who's 57 years old, fought in the Soviet army with her Russian cousins, and she's now put the uniform back on, stood with her 25-year-old son with an AK-47 in her hand. It's terrifying. Yeah,
it's not something we would have wanted to see, not on the back of the pandemic, right?
Absolutely. Never. Never.
I thought we'd all had enough of that when that.
Indeed, well, we can just pray for peace. That's the only thing. You know, people say to me, "Do you support the Ukraine? Do you support Russia?" Actually, I support peace. That's the one thing I pray for.
Yeah, I think that's a good stance to take. And I mean, in your life, I mean, you've had such an interesting life. You've got this Russian and Eastern European connection, and then you've got homes in Malta and Florida. Malta I've been to and presented for the credit management professionals over there, so I know Malta, and I've also done an aviation repossession presentations from Malta. One of my groups that I'm in has a stint there, so it's a beautiful place, beautiful place. And how much of the year do you spend in Malta and Florida?
About 6 months of the year in Malta, and then the rest of the time, I'll say, actually, it's very difficult to work out. I have to keep a note of the days for tax purposes, of course. I've got to maintain my tax residency in Malta, because Malta is very, very tax efficient for property people. That's probably why it's a very popular island for anybody outside of Malta who's in property, or outside of Malta who's into online gaming, because it's also very tax efficient for them. Obviously, I'd love to live in Florida. I've got my home in Florida, built it in 2005. So in the sticks of Florida compared to where you are, we're right in the center of Polk County, which is very redneck, as the locals would call it. But we're on a lake, and it's very natural, and we go to the rodeo at the weekend. I'd love to spend a lot more time there, but firstly, they won't let me because of a visa, because I haven't really got business over there. And secondly, even if I could, it would be very tax disadvantageous to me. So maybe one day in the future. I've even thought about living in Russia as well, because Russia and Ukraine, the whole of Eastern Europe, is so beautiful, and it's massive. You can't gather the scale of the place. You know, the whole of Europe would fit into Russia and leave some space left. So the diversity is phenomenal as well. So I've even considered living there. But Malta's great as well, of course. It's the jewel of the Mediterranean. For people who don't know where it is, it's kind of, if you draw a line between Sicily and Tunisia, it's right there in the middle of the Mediterranean. Tiny, tiny little island. It's 37 kilometers by 17. It's got 500,000 people. Probably the nicest sea in the world. And for those of you who are Game of Thrones fans, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, did you, Claire?
I am a big Game of Thrones fan, yeah.
Did you know that the silent city of Mdina, which was originally the capital of Malta, was also King's Landing in Series 1?
I did not know that. In fact, I was thinking I said to my husband, we should start watching it from the beginning again.
Yeah, watch it again, because Daenerys Targaryen married Khal Drogo in our neighbouring island of Gozo as well.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
It is.
Well, they're talking about Jon Snow coming back for season 9. You heard it here, apparently.
Wow, didn't know that one. Oh, I'm excited about that, Claire.
Yeah.
Most exciting thing we've discussed the whole time.
I
know. Game of Thrones is far more interesting than tax.
I know, but yeah, you know, the property work pays the bills, right? So
it does indeed.
But so you've escaped and work across different jurisdictions, which I always love to see that in Brits doing that, because we're so lucky, aren't we, that we can do that with our language and our culture. It enables us to work in different places, and I find certainly in my travels, people are so welcoming to us. A lot of Brits,
Absolutely.
I think, aren't they? You know, they love to talk to. I mean, the Americans love us. You may not feel that as a Brit, not you personally, but somebody watching this. But my experience is that people are very welcoming to us.
They are all over the world, pretty much. I mean, even in Russia, especially if you've got a bottle of vodka which costs about £2, you know, you're very welcome there.
Yeah, I understand
Malta, I love it, and I think modern technology has enabled us to sort of live this digital nomad type lifestyle as well. It is becoming a lifestyle of choice for many more people than ever could have done it even a decade ago.
Yes, I thoroughly agree with that, and I certainly support that, and I know you do too. Now, in terms of that, Property 118 is a, you know, it's not confined by boundaries. Is it totally concentrating on the UK property market, or has it spread its wings?
I think, well, yes and no. So there are readers of Property 118 all over the world. We know that from the Google statistics.
Yeah.
But most of those people read Property 118 because they invest in property in the United Kingdom. So we don't get many people talking about what's happening about, you know, in the New York property market, for example. That was never our intention. We may create other spin-offs. So we own the domain property118.us, and we actually may launch it there one day. Who knows? Maybe that will be my golden ticket to a visa. There's a similar way to the way you might have done it, Claire. I don't know.
Yeah, I did. I set Shergroup up in the US and brought the business to the US. So you're totally on. You know, that's exactly how to do it.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. I'll talk to you when I'm ready for that then.
Yeah. But I mean, so Property 118 is centric around the UK, and it enables you to, you know, and do your team work offshore, or are they all based? I mean, how many people do you have in Property 118? Who looks after the shop?
It's probably over 30 now. Everybody works from home.
Yeah. Right.
We have another director, shareholder who lives in Malta, who invested into the business just over a year ago, just because we had a lot of things in common. We've got a consultant at Property 118, who's also a UK landlord, who came to live over in Malta for the same reasons as I did, the tax reasons. But most of them either live around Norfolk or the Cotswolds, because obviously Property 118 is a joint venture with Cotswold barristers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's great to hear how your business has developed, how you've developed your specialism in property into this terrifically reputable brand, and how you're helping. I mean, honestly, government should be knocking on your door and saying, Mark, you know, how can you help us get out of this hole we've built around? Well,
funnily enough, when they launched Section 24, I was invited to the Treasury.
Oh, good.
They didn't listen. They obviously listened, but they didn't. They just played lip service, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. You just have to keep knocking on that door, or you're not going to run for Parliament. But you know, you're definitely an influencer. So I hope somebody in government continues to listen to you and your audience in Property 118, who are living this life of being landlords, right?
Indeed.
You know, that's really important. So listen, how do people get you? Obviously, they come to the website property118.com. That's the focal point of everything we've talked about today. You've got different channels.
It's free to create a member profile. When you create a member profile, you can then decide whether you want newsletters daily, weekly, or not at all.
Yeah.
You can go onto the website whenever you like. All members, once they're members and logged in, they can actually communicate via a messaging system, pretty much like Facebook does.
Yeah.
So they can communicate without sharing their contact details openly if they want to do that. Obviously, if they choose to private message their telephone number or email, that's up to them. So yeah, anybody is welcome to come along to Property 118 and just engage.
Great.
Most people start off curious, lurkers, if you like, just reading the articles, reading the comments, and then something catches their eye and they can't help themselves, they dive in, and they have a lot of fun from doing so. So yeah, it's all free, that side of the business. It started off as a blog, it started off as a passion of mine. I'd exited a very, very successful business before Property 118. Property 118 was never intended to be a business. It was always intended to be a not-for-profit forum for landlords to share best practice in the UK. That was all it was intended to be.
You can put a big tick in the box.
Indeed. Like to get a few more. Thank you, Claire. The rest, the monetization stuff, just kind of spun off the back of that because I can't help my entrepreneurialism. But I am.
I apologise.
No, I'm kind of semi-retired now, so I'll engage on the forum, but I don't do so. You know, people say, "Oh, you're self-promoted." Well, actually, I'm not, because I'm not a tax consultant anymore. I retired from that over a year ago. But I have a fantastic team. So if you do need any professional advice as well on that side of things, then I'm sure my team will be delighted to hear from any of your viewers and anybody watching this video.
Well, I can say that people that come on Shergroup on the Sofa, most of them get picked, and they get picked by me for a couple of reasons. First of all, they have their feet on the ground, which I always like to see. However high up you become as an expert or in business, however successful you've been, I like to see people that keep their feet on the ground, and you have definitely achieved that. You are the most accessible guy with this tremendous backstory, but you make it very easy to engage with you and your brand, and not everybody does that, and I think that's a huge feather in your cap as well. So thank you for all that you're doing for landlords, and Shergroup is so pleased to be associated with you and your brand. So
well, thank you for yours. It's great to be associated with yours as well. I know a lot of people picked up on the Shergroup brand from the TV stuff that you've done. Can't Pay Will Take It Away, and then there's another one as well, isn't there?
Call the Bailiffs. Yes.
Call the Bailiffs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't get British television anymore, so I haven't seen that one yet. But I'm sure I'll pick it up somewhere. Well, but yeah, it's great when two brands operating in a similar space. I know you do other things as well, but you have a lot of landlords that work with you. Either to recover possession or to recover money. So I know that you can, if some tenant is not paying the rent but driving around in a Porsche, you'll be quite happy to take it away from them. And we see on TV that you do a great job of that. So when brands like ours come together, I think only good can come from that, and
exactly
long may it continue.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of this segment, really, is to demonstrate the connections we do have and the friendships that we build through talking and working with people like yourself. So thank you so much for today. For everyone else, a great interview with Mark today. Please make use of him and his brand. If you're a landlord, please don't sit there and suffer and worry with all the comment going on in the press about the changes for landlords. There's plenty of people at Property 118. There's people at Shergroup that can help you. You're not on your own. I think that's the message that we want to leave you with today. Check us out at shergroup.com. Mark, we'd love you to subscribe to Shergroup YouTube. So if you could do that today, that would be great.
I will do, and I'll be sharing, once you've published this video, I'll be sharing it on my social media, Property 118 social media, and of course it'll be in the Property 118 newsletter as well, Claire. So thanks again for a great interview. Thanks
a lot. Everyone else, check us out on Facebook, Insta. Go to shergroup.com. Everybody have a great rest of the day. We're looking forward to the weekend here at Shergroup. It's been a long week, and we'll see you all next week. And thank you, Mark. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks again, Claire.
Thank you.